So, you ever been in a discussion or debate with your friend or colleague or just anyone online? Usually it's online. You have a discussion with a Democrat, and you bring up the history of the Democrat Party and just tell them how much they really enjoyed slavery, how much they supported Jim Crow and segregation, and they were against civil rights for black people. When you bring that up, you get one of two responses. Guaranteed. You're either going to get that the entire country was racist back then. So they try and, dispel and just spread out some of the horrible, nasty history of the Democrat Party and just put it all on dilute it, put it all in the United States. Which is odd because if the entire country hated black people as much as the Democrat Party did, you'd never get a chance. There'd never be a 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment because there'd be no one to vote for it. But there is a 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment because the Democrat Party hated black people so much they had to put protection, special protection for black people into the Constitution just to protect them from the hatred of the Democrat Party. A law would not have been enough. They're like, no, these freaking people hate black people so much that we can't even make it a law because they'll just get in. When they get power, they'll vote it the hell out. We got to put this bad boy in the Constitution. We got to put it up on a high shelf so that those hateful Democrats can't go after black people, at least legally, and use the law to get them. That's how much they hate black people. But yeah, it's the whole country. So you either get that crap, or the better one is the party's flipped. Oh yeah, I like that one. Let's talk about it. Hello everyone, this is Keith, and welcome to the Ghetto Sapien channel, your home for inner city intelligence. Today we're going to talk about the Democrat Party, their history, and how they can't get away from it. Try as they might. And I can't blame them for wanting to get away from that history. It is a nasty, disgusting historical record they have to deal with, but they need to own it. So, getting to that, the party's flipped theory that they keep throwing out there. The question that always needs to be asked, and I love asking it just to see, because they never really think about it. They just go with the party's flipped and really present no evidence. I just ask when. When did the parties flip? When did they say, we're tired of being racist Democrats? Let's, the Republicans are like, we'll be racist this time. Just let us take it from here. We'll run with it. When did that happen? Give me a year. Because in order for it to make sense that the parties flip, it'd have to have happened like in the 1950s, 40s, 60s, something like that. Because if the parties flip, if the Republicans had taken over the South, say like 2000 or something like that, it wouldn't make any sense because the South wasn't really all that known to be racist back in 2000 or the 1990s or 1980s. It wasn't particularly racist because, look, I grew up in New York. New York was freaking racist. I even spent time in Canada. Canada was pretty wild, too, when I was a kid. So, so the South wasn't particularly racist in the 1980s or 90s and stuff like that. Which, the country was pretty much, fair and even around then. It wasn't like a hotbed of racism in the South. So again, for this theory to work, you have to have had Republicans taking over the South like in the 50s, like in a pre-civil rights era. So we need to see evidence of that. The other thing we need to see is the attitude. Has the attitude changed? Because with flipping, with the Democrats, becoming a non-racist party, all those non-racist attributes should be with them. They should, they shouldn't be racist anymore. They shouldn't talk down to black people. We should treat them as equals. And we should see evidence of that. And let's look and see if we see any. Let's see. Oh, but here's an article that was written just a few years ago that I don't know if some of you guys have seen it. but it was a study that was done, and basically, liberals treat minorities as if they're stupid. Yep. My only beef with this article is that they're saying the liberals. I don't think Hillary's a liberal. I think she's a leftist. Liberals are, and I go by the classic term of liberals, where it's just live and let live, laissez-faire, things like that. Those are liberals. I'm a liberal to a classic liberal to a very large degree. I believe live your life the way you want to live it. Just don't interfere with mine and we're good. Leftists are authoritarians. They believe in centralized government. They believe you shouldn't have any rights that the government doesn't give you already. That's Hillary. That's the modern Democrat Party. So it's not just Hillary. It's her voters, her supporters too. So this article goes on. It was written a little while ago. So it says it's not unusually as ridiculous as Al Gore's trying to sound like Martin Luther King Jr. at black churches or Barack Obama's use of ghetto-style accent before black audiences. But a new study shows that Democrats really do talk down to minorities, whereas white Republicans speak essentially the same way to both white and non-white audiences. And you can see that with Trump. He speaks to people the same way. New Yorker, I never noticed a New Yorker speaking ghetto, to black people. So I think it's one of the positive traits from growing up in that city. You see such a mixture of people. You're not gonna you look an idiot trying to speak like a Yiddish accent when you speak to Jews, or have a Hispanic accent when you speak to Spanish people. You look like a moron. So we're expecting you to act the same way around different people. But I think politics tends to develop phoniness and sophistry, so people trying to manipulate by showing you're one of them. But it's really seems to be specifically black people they do this to. They don't do this to any other group. And I think it stems from the fact that they think that black people are stupid, just like the article says, that we're more interested in how something sounds than the substance of what's being said. That's bigotry I think it's racism to some degree. I'm not saying it's institutionalized racism. It's racism on a personal level, and racism still exists, at least on a personal level. If it is institutionalized, well, who runs most of the institutions nowadays? Leftists for the most part. If it's culture, education, if it's entertainment, if it's government for the most part, those are big, vast institutions. They're pretty much run by the left. So if you got a complaint with institutionalized racism, then you're talking about the left anyway. So they speak down to us. But it's one thing to look at a dry article, because I didn't read the whole thing anyway. And it's not really necessary because I got receipts. I got evidence. You can hear it for yourself. Check it out.
What's something that you always carry with you?
Hot sauce.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I like how she said, yeah. She threw that out there like, let me see if these dumb freaking people fall for it. And she was even surprised, like, oh my God, they didn't think I was full of crap when I said hot sauce.
Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
I don't feel no ways tired.
Oh my God, this is... it's been a while since I've heard this, and it's still painful.
I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy.
Again, you can see she kind of just eases it out there just to see, are these people gonna go for this? And when they start going for it, she really gets into it. But there's that moment where she's not sure if they're gonna like torture her ass for sounding like a moron, because she knows she wouldn't speak this way to any other group. They do it to black people because they don't respect our intelligence. But here's the thing, it's not just the politicians. It's the white leftist voters that think we're stupid too. Ami Horowitz did a very good video, and I'm just going to show a couple of clips of it, where he just went to, it was Berkeley University in California. And this is how black people feel about, how white people feel about black people.
Do you think it suppresses the African American vote?
Definitely.
Tell us how.
Because they're less likely to have state IDs.
Minority voters are less likely to have the kinds of IDs that have been described or required.
These type of
What kind of IDs can't we get our hands on? Anyway, continuing.
people don't live in areas with easy access to DMVs or other places where they can get identification.
You can always
These people don't live in places that don't have access to Department of Motor Vehicles. All right.
get IDs you do over the internet. Does that also make it difficult for black people in particular?
Yeah, you have to have access to the internet. You have to be able to pay an internet service provider for certain fees.
Do you think
Oh yes, and black people aren't on Instagram and Facebook. It's amazing how they can't find their way to those big social media sites. Or Twitter. Isn't there a black Twitter? Can't be.
that's harder for black people to go online?
Well, I feel like they don't have the knowledge of how it works.
See, and it doesn't even matter what age you're talking. There was an older white guy, there's a young white chick. Where did they get this information from that we just don't have common sense?
A lot of people have smartphones, but you might not have data.
For most of the communities, they don't really know what is out there just because they're not aware or they're not informed. I also think there's a repression of black voting with how if you're a convicted felon, you're not allowed to vote and everything. And when you look at swing states like Florida, that's a huge population of the African American.
All right, so a huge population of criminals in Florida among the black population. All right, so look, here's what we learned from this, is that if I had taken, say we had the technology to take a camera back, say to Oglethorpe University in Georgia, back 100 years, and you asked them how do they feel about black people and the intelligence of black people, you wouldn't get responses very much different from the ones you just saw in Army Horowitz's video. It would sound exactly the same. Maybe spiced with a couple of N-words here and some other antebellum insults for black people. But there wasn't much difference at all. So we haven't seen any flipping of attitude there. So I don't know if the party's flipped. But let's look at some colorful pictures to just give us an idea of what the political landscape looked like throughout the country, starting in 1976. So here we go. All right. This is 1976. As you can see, most of the country, it's pretty evenly split. You even got Texas was blue and California was red. That's amazing, isn't it? But the South was still dominated in 1976 by the Democrats. And there was some racism going on still, but it wasn't by the Republicans because they didn't own the states. Let's move forward 4 years, 1980. This is when Reagan won, and the South flipped pretty much for the whole country. So I guess the whole country was racist then it would make sense. You can see that the governor of Georgia, who was Jimmy Carter, was the governor of Georgia, so he won his own state. That was good for him. That was one of 4 states he won. And speaking of Georgia, when I first moved to Georgia in the late 1980s, it still had a Democrat governor. I think it was Zell Miller at the time. And we didn't get a Republican governor until 2002 in Purdue. So Georgia didn't flip until 2002. It wasn't like a bastion, a sanctuary of racism in 2002, and Republicans just took it over. So I don't see the evidence that the party's flipped. But let's move forward here. Next 4 years. This is 1984. This is when Reagan ran against Walter Mondale, and it was a bloodbath. And again, most of the country was red. I guess most of the country is racist then too, because that's what red means racist. Even New York was racist at the time, I guess. So yeah, you start seeing, these are just like electoral maps. So they're snapshots in time. They don't really say too much. But this is when it started looking more or less like it looks today, where you see California turning blue and Texas turning red and Georgia, see, still blue, and a little more redness starting to spread, a little redness in these areas. It sounds like it's a rash in the lower parts of the country. But yeah, so in 1992, we started seeing what we see today. Moving forward again, another 4 years, and it's year 2000, and this is kind of what it looks like today. Okay, so at this point, the South is pretty much solid red, and it's like that today. But it's the year 2000. That's a little late for a flip if the country is supposed to be, if the South is now supposed to be racist and the North isn't. But see, here's the deal. What marked the Democrat takeover and dominance of the South was ignorance, slavery, ignorance, segregation, poverty, and bigotry. And black people did very poorly in the South when the Democrats ran it. Now in the North, you got ignorance because you got horrible schools. You got poverty in the inner city. You got high crime, and you have segregation because they have segregated college campus dorms and things like that. That was in the news. Separate proms and things like that wherever the Democrats are. So in reality, the parties really didn't flip. All they did was flip location. When the South was dominated by Democrats, again, you had segregation, you had a horrible situation for black people. And now that the Democrats are in the North, in cities like Philly and Chicago and New York, and where the Democrats dominate, you have poverty, you have segregation, because some of the most segregated parts of the country, the most segregated schools and neighborhoods tend to be in blue areas, even in Georgia, where the Democrats aren't in the majority. In the areas where they cluster, it's segregated. You have black neighborhoods in Democrat areas that have been run the same way forever, and you have white areas in Georgia, outside of it, in the Atlanta area, that are gentrified. There's not many black people living there. So you have the segregation there. So like I said, the parties did not flip. They still have the Democrats still have the same traits, where they speak down to black people, don't respect them. And wherever the Democrats run, it's just a really bad situation for black people. So don't go for the party flip garbage. That is just a way of them trying to ignore their history and their present. But that's just my comment. What's yours? Like, share, comment, and subscribe.